Picture this for a moment, a world without Mrs. Brown's boys. No outrageous one-liners. No fourth-wall-breaking chaos. No Agnes Brown shouting across a living room that somehow feels both completely ridiculous and strangely familiar. Hard to imagine, right? Love it or hate it, Mrs. Brown's Boys didn't just become another sitcom, it became a phenomenon. Loud, unapologetic, and wildly unpredictable, it carved out a space in television that no other show quite dared to touch. It wasn't polished, it wasn't subtle, and it certainly wasn't trying to impress critics. But audiences? They couldn't get enough. Yet behind the laughter, the wigs, and the perfectly timed chaos, something else was happening. Quietly at first, then more noticeably. People were leaving. Some departures felt natural. Others came as a shock. And a few? They left fans asking uncomfortable questions. What really happened behind the scenes of one of the UK and Ireland's most successful comedy shows? Were these exits simply personal choices or signs of something deeper? Let's take a closer look. Long before the bright lights of television and sold-out arena tours, Mrs. Brown's Boys began in a much simpler place, on modest stages in Ireland during the early 1990s. At the center of it all was Brendan O'Carroll. At the time, he wasn't a household name. He was a struggling writer, a stand-up comedian trying to find his voice, and someone who understood people, especially Irish families, better than most. Inspired by the strong, no-nonsense women he grew up around, he created a character that would change everything, Agnes Brown. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't refined. But she was real. A loud, sharp-tongued Dublin mammy with a heart hidden beneath layers of sarcasm and chaos. Interestingly, Brendan never originally intended to play her himself. But sometimes, the most defining moments happen by accident. When an actress failed to show up for a performance, Brendan stepped in. Wig on. Dress on. No rehearsal. No second thoughts. And just like that, Agnes Brown came to life. The audience reaction was immediate and electric. There was something raw about her. Something unpredictable. She didn't just perform for the audience. She spoke to them, teased them, pulled them into her world. She broke every rule of traditional theater and somehow made it work. That unpredictability became the show's secret weapon. As the stage productions grew, so did the audience. What started as small performances evolved into packed theaters across Ireland and the UK. It wasn't polished, and that was exactly the point. Lines were forgotten. Jokes went off script. Actors broke character. And the audience loved every second of it, because it felt real. It took nearly 2 decades for Mrs. Brown's Boys to make the leap to television. When it finally did in 2011, not everyone was convinced it would work. The format stayed true to its roots, visible bloopers, live audience reactions, and direct camera interactions. It felt more like a stage show captured on film than a traditional sitcom. Critics were quick to dismiss it. They called it outdated, crude, over the top. But audiences saw something else. They saw familiarity, family, chaos that mirrored their own lives, just turned up to 11. And just like that, the show exploded. Christmas specials became must-watch events. Live tours sold out arenas. Merchandise, books, even a feature film followed. What Brendan O'Carroll had built wasn't just a show anymore. It was an empire. But success, especially rapid success, has a way of bringing pressure with it. And in this case, that pressure would slowly begin to show. One of the most unique aspects of Mrs. Brown's Boys was its cast. This wasn't just a group of actors. It was quite literally a family. Brendan's wife, Jennifer, played his on-screen daughter. His real children took on key roles. Close friends became regular cast members. That chemistry? You couldn't fake it. It was warm, natural, effortless. But blending family and business is rarely simple. Over time, relationships evolve, priorities shift, and even the strongest bonds can face strain when placed under constant pressure. And eventually the first major change came. When Fiona O'Carroll stepped away from her role as Maria Brown, it wasn't just another cast exit. It felt personal. After all, Fiona wasn't just playing a character, she had been part of the show, since its earliest days. She had grown with it, shaped it, and helped define one of its most grounded characters. Maria wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She wasn't the center of chaos. She was the balance, the calm presence in a whirlwind of madness. So, when she decided to step back, fans were stunned. Why would someone so deeply connected to the show walk away? The answer, as it turned out, wasn't dramatic. It was deeply human. Fiona spoke openly about reaching a point in her life where she needed something different. After years of playing the same role, she felt a quiet but persistent realization. She was living someone else's story, and she wanted to write her own. There was no feud, no falling out, no behind-the-scenes drama, just a decision. A decision to prioritize her family, her personal growth, and her own identity outside of the show. Brendan supported her completely, and yet, despite the understanding, her absence was felt. Without Maria, the show lost a certain grounding force. The chaos became just a little louder, and the balance slightly off. It was the first sign that even something as strong as Mrs. Brown's Boys could change. If Fiona's departure was surprising, Rory Cowan's exit was something else entirely. For many fans, this one hurt. Rory wasn't just a character. He was energy. He was color. He was the spark that lit up every scene he entered. With his flamboyant style, sharp wit, and unmistakable presence, he became one of the show's most beloved figures. But behind that energy, something was shifting. Rory had been there from the beginning, not just as an actor, but as part of the show's foundation. He had helped build it from the ground up. So, why leave? The answer wasn't scandalous. It was something far quieter. After years of balancing work with caring for his mother, and then dealing with her passing, Rory found himself in a place of emotional exhaustion. The joy that once fueled his performances had faded, and in its place was something heavier. Grief, burnout, a need to step away. He later admitted something that surprised many fans. He wasn't happy anymore. That honesty changed how people saw his departure. This wasn't about conflict. It wasn't about dissatisfaction with the show. It was about survival. About recognizing when something you once loved no longer feels right, and having the courage to walk away. His departure left a gap that was hard to fill. The show continued, of course, but for many viewers, something essential was missing. Some exits are quiet, others are anything but. Gary Hollywood's departure was the latter. As Dino Doyle, he brought a unique charm to the show, sharp, stylish, and effortlessly entertaining. His chemistry with Rory was a highlight, creating moments that fans genuinely looked forward to. So, when he suddenly disappeared, people noticed. There was no farewell, no explanation within the show, just absence. And then the truth began to surface. Gary claimed his departure stemmed from a pay dispute, one that raised bigger questions about how cast members were treated behind the scenes. What followed wasn't just speculation. It became public. Legal claims, media attention, divided opinions. For a show that had always presented itself as one big happy family, this was a turning point. Fans didn't know what to believe. Some stood firmly behind Gary, feeling he had been treated unfairly. Others supported Brendan, trusting his leadership and vision. But regardless of where people stood, one thing was clear. The illusion of perfect harmony had cracked. And once that happens, it's hard to ignore. Unlike the others, Jennifer Gibney didn't leave entirely. But something changed. As Kathy Brown, she had always been the voice of reason, the grounded, intelligent counterbalance to Agnes's chaos. Her role was subtle but essential. Over time, though, fans began to notice she was appearing less and less. Was she being written out? Was there tension? The rumors started as they always do, but the reality was far less dramatic. The decision was intentional. Both Jennifer and Brendan agreed that her character had reached a natural point. Rather than forcing new storylines, they chose to step back and allow other characters to grow. From a creative perspective, it made sense. But from a viewer's perspective, it still felt like a loss. Because sometimes, it's not the loudest characters that hold a story together. It's the quiet ones. Stepping into an established role is never easy. Stepping into one that audiences already love? That's something else entirely. When Damian McKiernan took over the role of Rory Brown, he wasn't just playing a character. He was stepping into someone else's legacy. And that comes with pressure, whether spoken or not. Damian approached the role differently, more subdued, more grounded. But for many fans, it was hard to adjust. Not because he lacked talent, but because the original version had left such a strong impression. Then, just as things began to settle, he too disappeared. Quietly. No major announcement. No dramatic exit. Just gone. Rumors linked his departure to the same tensions surrounding Gary Hollywood's exit. Nothing was fully confirmed. But by this point, the pattern was hard to ignore. Mrs. Brown's Boys is still here. Still performing. Still making audiences laugh. But it's not exactly the same show it once was. And maybe that's inevitable. Every long-running series evolves. People come and go. Dynamics shift. But in this case, those changes feel more noticeable because the show was built so heavily on chemistry, familiarity, and connection. When one piece moves, everything else adjusts. And sometimes the audience feels that shift before anyone else says it out loud. So, what do all these departures really mean? Were they signs of trouble? Or simply the natural progression of a show that has been running for decades? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Some actors left to grow. Some left to heal. Some left under more complicated circumstances. But each departure tells a story not just about the show, but about the people behind it. Because behind every character, every joke, every moment of laughter, there's a real person with real challenges, real decisions, and real lives beyond the stage. Out of all these departures, which one surprised you the most? Was it the emotional goodbye, the quiet disappearance, or the controversy that changed how people saw the show? One thing's for sure. Mrs. Brown's Boys may still be making people laugh, but the story behind it is far more complex than it first appears. And sometimes the most interesting stories are the ones happening off camera.